You're listening to Inside the Minds podcast with Dante Marsh and Ryan Hyde, where we talk about sports, life, and whatever the hell else we want to talk about.
31-yard penalty to support pass interference call against the Lions this year. County out of the hands, and there's Dante Marsh with the block. And it's going to be a pick six for the veteran. 29th career interception. Almost on cue. 80-yard return for the 10-year veteran.
So there was a lot there that I wanted to, talk about with you guys, because there's a lot of stuff people don't know, and that's where the Gracies wanted to keep it.
Right.
So there's a podcast I did that had a little documentary film a few years ago, about 4 years ago, and they did the same thing. Came in and talked about UFC 1 and brought the footage in, and they did the podcasting. It was a 30 for 30 actually, and so they didn't know a lot of the stuff that went on behind the curtains behind UFC 1, because it was not just a setup for them, but what it was is they cheated too. Because I ask people a question to this day. If Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was so great, okay, now you got to remember something. I'm not talking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm talking about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm going to take one person out of the Gracie family, which is Hickson. He's a Gracie brother, but he was doing a different thing. If you really go back and look at Hickson fight and look at his videos, you go, wait, what is that? And I've had a conversation with him, and he's not fighting, he's not using jiu-jitsu to fight, which is what that's why a lot of the fights in UFC started to go into the ground, and like guys are confused about how to fight today. If you look at it, you see a lot of confusion. You see a lot of great fights, but you don't see, after 28 years, almost 30 years in this sport, you don't see it where you see the dynamics like it should. Everybody's still plod, wait, this kind of thing like that. You don't see it like it should. Why? Because the Gracies not only cheated, not necessarily I'll say they cheated, but what they were doing is they changed the rules so their system couldn't get tested. You say, how do we know that to be true? Is that they had 130 years ago, 30 years ago, or 28 years ago, they had 170 first cousins in the Gracie family. 170.
Wow.
How many how many MMA fighters or champions do you see them have? How many UFC fighters do you see them have? You mean after 30 years, you can't produce one UFC champion?
Right.
One? Go back and look at it. Every one of the Gracies that fought in the UFC got smoked. That's because they didn't put their system to the test like everybody else did, because everybody else had to fail in the beginning. They did not. So they went off of those four fights that Hoist got, handpicked certain things, called guys to the arena to fight when guys weren't ready and prepared. And Hoist did his job and beat him. I ain't gonna take that away from him. But when it came down to a system getting tested, never got tested. And then everybody else started going to the Machado brothers, and then going to Brazil, to the Carlson Gracie family. And now you start to see other Vanderlei Silva, Victor Belfort, Damian Maia. You see all those cats. That's a different side of the family.
Right.
So if you kind of look at it, you go, wait a minute, what was the fruit of that? Is their system has never been tested. In fact, let me rephrase. That's not true. Hoist was tested, and he failed miserably when he came back and fought Matt Hughes.
Right.
If that fight is in Brazil, Matt Hughes could, if the referee doesn't stop it, seriously hurt Hoist. because Hoist ain't going to tap out. His family wouldn't have thrown in the towel. He'd have gone out of the ring like that. That's Matt Hughes you're talking about. So where was the Gracie system when there were no more secrets? Yet the karate fighters today, the Muay Thai fighters today, the kickboxing guys, the wrestlers guy, all of us evolved, except the Gracie family.
Wow. Right. That's crazy.
If you think about it, like that's how legal. So what I'm saying is that not only did they, it was a setup kind of thing a little bit. What I took it for was a moment to evolve. They couldn't evolve. See, I told Horian to his face, I said, Horian, you got to do two things. One, you either got to teach Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to everybody, it's going to evolve, which things means you let the cat out of the bag. Or two, you got to close up shop, don't teach it to anybody else, and you can't make no money. What you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? It sold out like every other karate system was. So Jiu-Jitsu got watered down. Then you had the Eddie Bravos, all those guys come in with their own ideas and start making it grow and start doing other things with it, and was allowed to do other things with it. And that's what made grappling what it is today. It's not the Gracies. It's not the Gracies. They gave us the basics of it, but the fighting aspect of it. And you say, okay, Zane, what's your acid test? Go back to UFC 9. That was the turning point. Don Fry versus Armin Patesh. John McCarthy don't stop that fight. Again, Armin Patesh is seriously injured. And he was one of the better Carlson Gracie style fighters.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just say that's some of the stuff that we didn't get a chance to like get into a little bit. It's not that other stuff wasn't great. It's just I figured, if Dante, you and I started talking, neighborhood stuff, Cali stuff, and so that took us way way.
So that's why I was saying that shit was good, because here's the deal. I never knew that. You talking about Harbor Homes, you talk about the connection. And then not only that, it's the fact that when we created this platform, Ryan was like, we want to get athletes, but I don't want to talk to athletes about athletic shit. Like,
oh, okay.
We do, but I don't want you to like, okay, we're gonna let you go. All right, give me a timeline of your athletic shit, and then boom, the interview over. No, this is a platform for people to really get to know who you are.
Okay.
Trust me. I mean, the basis in the foundation of it is you're utilizing your celebrityness,
right?
Okay.
Or,
your name obviously is up there because of the sports background.
Yeah.
But you're more than just a 6-degree black belt. You're more than like the bouncer shit. Like that's I want to know. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's the highlight. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Interesting. And I think people need to know, like, for example, with me, I used to have dreads, a mouthful of gold teeth and shit, like, young and silly. So when I used to do interviews early on in my career, I would have certain, reporters kind of look at me when they start interviewing me and like, oh shit, and I'm covered in tattoos and shit. And they look at me funny because, from them, judging a book by its cover, they couldn't see the depth until I start talking and articulating myself. So that's why this Inside the Minds podcast is so unique in the fact that we don't want to just get a bunch of athletes and just fucking regurgitate their athletic practice. We want to know. This is your platform to talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about.
Okay.
Stuff, but
yeah.
Okay, I'm glad to know that. Now I know that. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah. No, and see, and Zane, we have the questions basically to keep the conversation going if need be, to make sure that we're educated on your career. And then that way we have a standing point to get into and then let you get into further the stories.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
So, I mean, if we get off topic or anything like that, by all means, it's all good with us.
Okay. Perfect.
Because we're going to chop and screw it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And definitely the thing about the extension cord and your childhood, we got to go back there because I still find that mind blowing for me. Because up in Canada, we did not have that kind of shit going on.
Oh yeah, man.
Yeah. Your mama and your daddy say, if you don't take your ass back outside, you come in that house crying, you better come back outside and fight. You better not come back in here crying. So like, and when we talked about earlier the PTSD aspect of it, raised wrong as shit back then. Our parents didn't know no better. But the one thing that I appreciate from my upbringing, growing up in inner city of Oakland, was the fact that you did get that alpha male, or at least your parents were trying to instill that in you, and you had to have it in those environments because you couldn't be no weenie. You was gonna get ate up in the neighborhood. So those were like, skills you had to have growing up in inner cities, man. Like, you had to.
Well, that's why I was saying, like when I look at some of the young kids today in the inner city neighborhoods, I think what happens is they're too sensitive, right? They're real sensitive because, um, I've been on the both sides of some police brutality growing up as a kid, and but my auntie was the first female Afro-American detective, one of the first for LAPD. She did 30 years for LAPD. And so she always told us if the police did something wrong, don't say nothing. Look at them, get their names, look at their nameplates, look at their license plate, and get their car number. So me and my cousin was playing one time, his mother. And the reason why I mention this is because if police said something to us, we didn't care about what he said because mama said something, daddy, talked about you, we played the dozens growing up, your mama this, your mama that, right? And you had to learn to take that. So we weren't as sensitive because I like to say they beat that weak shit out of us. They didn't allow us to be weak because we couldn't be weak. And I see a lot of cats today, they wind up getting in jail or go on some fight on some bullshit because they too sensitive about some, man, they don't know how to let some shit go. Well, so I look at that. That's how I'm glad that my mom taught me, man, boy, he's so when he talk about you. Does your mama wear combat boots? You fighting somebody because you say your mama wear combat boots? You see me in some combat boots? No, then leave that boy alone.
Well, I mean, the sensitivity, I think this is what's plaguing the young generation today. And this is, and I truly believe this. They didn't come from that era, man. They saw. And they think they're tough because they can say shit like on the phone or on Instagram, or they could type it. And then when you see them in person, they don't have that same energy.
That's right.
I'm from that era and you from that era. Like, listen, man, you ain't got to like me. We ain't got to be partners and friends, but there will be no disrespect tolerated.
That's right.
Because as a man, I don't disrespect no man. I mean, you treat everybody with respect until they show you something different.
Right.
You treat people accordingly. But the problem that's going on in the world today is, like you said, is softness and sensitivity. I think the young girls have more masculinity than the young boys. And
I think I agree 100% on that.
It's a role reversal. So
a
lot of these young dudes are perpetrating like they men, but they still little boys, and they hide behind, they throw rocks and hide. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Today's guest on Inside the Minds podcast, we have a 6-degree black belt. He is also a 4-time international kickboxing champion. To go along with that, a 2-time world kickboxing champion, the 2005 MMA world champion, fought in UFC 1 and 9. Please welcome, with no further ado, Mr. Zane Frazier.
Hey guys, thank you for that, Dante. Appreciate that. That's a great intro.
I do what I do when I can.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dante. That's why I have you ripping, buddy, because you're the best at it. So.
All right, guys.
Let's get into it. So, you're from Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the West LA. My parents divorced when I was young. My mom had to wind up going back to South Central LA. My dad had lived in Beverly Hills, kind of Beverly Hills, Wilshire area, Wilshire District, what they call the Wilshire District area. So during the week, I was going back to the hood, and then on the weekends, I'd go to Beverly Hills. So I had the best of both worlds a little bit. But my father was one of the first Afro-Americans to have his own version of AM PM in Compton. And that was when Compton was horrible. Compton's just bad right now. Actually, it's a theme park now. Compton's a theme park. You can actually go through and pay $65 and somebody take you to go to Compton as a drive-through, and you can see a tourist attraction. So that was when Compton was horrible, man. So we were going. So a lot of times I was with my dad at a store. We'd be in Compton a lot of the times. And so that's kind of the area I grew up. My auntie grew up South Central, right off of Vermont and Imperial, right over there in that area. And then my aunties were all spread out to Gardena, South Central, and stuff like that, Inglewood, things like that. And then we finally got. I finally lived. Well, I got kicked out of school for fighting as a kid because my cousins would always say, "Hey, my cousin know karate. My cousin know karate," and I'm out there shooting hoop, playing basketball. And all of a sudden they say, "Hey, man, you so and so's cousin?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, and he punched me in the face, and so I started whooping him up with karate. Next thing I know, I'm going to the office, getting expelled out of school, and I'm saying, "Well, how come I'm getting expelled?" "Well, because you use karate." "Well, sorry, that's how I fight, right? Punch and kick, right?" And so that's kind of how I grew up. So by the time I finally got to a school that would finally take me, I wound up in Hawthorne. And so that's kind of where I spent a lot of my time in Hawthorne. That's really where my sports started to excel. The principal's a cool guy, Mr. Blake. He was the one who kept me out of trouble a lot of time, had me do things that now considered combine training stuff just to calm me down and keep me out of trouble and keep from me getting my butt whooped by my mama in class. So that's kind of where I kind of grew up in that area. Then I went to Fairfax High School. I went to, that kind of thing. And that's where I graduated and got a D1 scholarship to the University of Idaho to play basketball under Don Munson. He was the guy. Don Munson was credited for recruiting Magic Johnson to Michigan State. And then when Michigan State won that championship, I went to Idaho because Don Munson was at Idaho. It was a little different story in there, but for the most part, that's how I wound up in Moscow, Idaho.
So why karate, Zane, and not boxing or wrestling or?
Well, keep in mind a couple of things, a few things. My father did have me in boxing because he was a Muhammad Ali fan. My mom was a Bruce Lee fan.
Okay.
So my mom had trained in karate. She was a brown belt in Shotokan. And back then in Shotokan, she took karate for a long time because she was part of the movement with the Black Panthers. So that whole thing that was going around back then, you took karate and you had a white belt and you didn't get your brown belt was when your belt got dirty. So that's how there was only one belt. It wasn't, the belts there were. In those systems back then, they had judo and grappling mixed in it. So those were what we call inclusive systems back then. So your karate had judo, had some jiu-jitsu in it. A lot of your Japanese systems back then had jiu-jitsu in it. And when I was taking karate from Pepperdine University, where my mom and I, where she went to university, and that campus wasn't always in Malibu. That campus was in South Central on Manchester, Vermont. And that's where we're actually there right now, what's called the Faith Dome. That's where that campus is. And so that's where we started taking karate, doing judo. And that's kind of where it was an inclusive karate system. But at that time, all of my instructor was Bob Owens, and he, along with Big Willie Short and the 5 founding fathers of the Black Karate Federation, known as the BKF, they were called the Magnificent Seven. And those were the inner city Black instructors that taught all the inner city kids grappling, boxing, Muay Thai, if you call it Muay Thai, because they just call it kicking the legs, and knees and elbows are always what they consider street fighting moves. And there were karate moves, there were street fighting moves. You didn't use your street fighting moves in karate because they were considered more lethal than your, basic punch and kicks kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I started up. And then we started learning from everybody else, going over to Johnny's house, Johnny's taking Kung Fu and so-and-so's doing this and doing that. So we all used to learn from each other.
So quick question. Was there, because I didn't take karate as a kid. I think I might've went to one session. I was all consumed with like sports, ball, sports, track, baseball, basketball, football. So is there a like an unwritten rule or some type of disrespect or people frown upon if you're mixing specific?
Well, not necessarily. Not back then. What they frowned upon if you left one instructor for another before you got your black belt. So we learned a couple of gi chokes that you call them gi chokes. We just learned how to choke and call it grappling moves. There was no specific terminology as far as what we did as a kid, because remember, we were kids at that time. So a lot of grappling moves you picked up because you watched the instructors get to the daily punch and kick and then wind up on the floor. Then they would go into judo mode. So it wasn't necessarily that they were frowned upon inclusive arts or arts that had other techniques in it from other disciplines. People got to remember what karate means. Karate means empty hands. Judo is karate. Jiu-jitsu is karate. Kickboxing is karate. Wrestling is karate. Boxing is karate. So all of it is karate because all karate means is empty hands. So in order to be effective, you had to know a little bit of everything because you didn't know what the other guy knew. So that's kind of how we were brought up in it. And that was in inner city LA. Wrestling, we didn't have it because that was an inner city. You weren't going to get, you had to go probably to Orange County to get some wrestling. There was nothing in Los Angeles County that you're going to get some wrestling and stuff like that, like you see it today. Now, my father wrestled. What's funny, my father went to McClymonds High School, and they got wrestling at McClymonds.
Hold on. Your dad,
my father went to McClymonds High School.
Wow.
You know where I graduated from? McClymonds High School.
There you go.
Family on 3 Warriors, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad went to high school with Bill Russell and Paul Silas.
Listen,
that's how. Yeah.
Cut you off. But when I ran down because it's on, you could Google it. It's on the Wikipedia for McClymonds. So for those who don't know, McClymonds is on Myrtle Street. It's smack dab in the hood. Like, it's not on the main street either. It's like situated off of the main street, like in between neighborhoods, like in the hood, right? That little ghetto ass high school has produced some of the best athletes ever. We got Major League Baseball, obviously Bill Russell, myself, Marcus Peters. The list goes on as well. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Guy Williams. I want to think Guy Williams came out of McClymonds. I'm not. Because Guy Williams, people don't know who Guy Williams is. Magic and him came out right about the same time, and we played against Guy Williams when he went to Washington State when they transferred from University of San Francisco, because the University of San Francisco canceled their basketball program, and that cat was the first 6'9" point guard that can shake. He was the first Kevin Durant. So he came out of, I think, McClymonds High School in Oakland. So we had a chance. My dad used to say, hey, man, this guy up here, Guy Williams, y'all LA boys don't know nothing about basketball. And my dad used to say that all the time. And we talk, man, we got Crenshaw, we got Dorsey, we got this, we got Fairfax, we got this. He said, y'all don't know nothing about basketball. Sure enough, Crenshaw goes to the state championship. McClymonds wears him out. Guy Williams, I mean, they said, man, that boy was bad back in the day. So now we know, yeah, Oakland had it going on back then.
Yes, sir. Indeed, it's a small world.
Yeah.
Last time, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Small world, man. That's dope.
Yeah.
So when did you? Because you got a basketball scholarship, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you already grew up taking karate and knowing how to handle yourself. I mean, now more disciplined because you're actually, taking the discipline of actual fighting, along with growing up in the inner city and having to have this machismo about you, this toughness about you, just so you can survive day to day, right?
Right.
So when did you know that, hey, I'm not gonna keep pursuing basketball, or did you get that itch, man? Hey, man, I want to fight.
Well, my parents had a rule, and the coaches had a rule back then. You had to play every single sport until you got to high school. Until you got to high school, and you had to pick one. So I was still in karate from 1971. Bruce Lee. I always go back to when Bruce Lee was alive, or when Bruce Lee died, because I know exactly where I was at the moment that I got the news. We saw that Bruce Lee was dead. So that was July 20th, 1973. Bruce Lee entered the dragon. Then we go to back. So I'm going all the way back to when Bruce Lee. It was Chinese Connection, so that came out in 72. So I started training in 1972 when I was 10, and I trained all the way until 78. And that's when I started high school. And my cousin died. He was a Mercedes-Benz mechanic, and a car fell on him and it crushed him. And so I didn't want to take karate from anyone else until I got to college in Idaho. So when I got to college in Idaho, I was playing ball, doing my thing. I got 2 letters from the Boston Celtics, because back then that was the year. People forget about that 1978 rule where the NBA could draft you as a freshman or in college, and or a freshman in college or in high school, and keep the rights to you until you declare that you don't want them. So you have to send the letters back. So my coach Don Munson, he made me tear up my letters literally and put them in the garbage can, tear up my dreams. So I'm mad. I'm walking on campus. This guy just tell me that he says you can have those letters and you can get off campus and go back, because he didn't want nobody thinking about the NBA, because a lot of people speculate that the reason he was like that because he felt that Magic Johnson should have stayed at Michigan State one more year. And so he didn't want players thinking about the NBA. So he told me to throw my letters up. So I was mad, walking around campus. So me and this cat get in a fight over a girl, and a girl I wound up marrying, my first wife. And we got into a fight, and then I got jumped by some football players. And so I was whooping one dude pretty good, and they all started jumping in on me because I hit this cat with a side kick, square dead in his jaw, and then bum rushed him. And then everybody else jumped in and held me down and beat me up. So then I went to, then the coach came, police came, stuff like that, and my face was swollen. So my girlfriend at the time, she said, so I went to stay at her apartment, and then my face was swollen, swelling went down. So she brought me this ad that said karate, kung fu, boxing, grappling, full contact. And she goes, maybe you should get back into fighting again. And so I said, you know what, I am. So I went down to the studio in Moscow, Idaho. Guy's name is Mark Roffling and Jerry Reinert. Those were my instructors at the time. Great guys, been my friends for 40 years. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I want to be the baddest street fighter in the world. And this is the spring of 1981. And he said, I said, I want to be the baddest fighter in the world. And he goes, what happened? You got beat up? And I go, yeah, I got beat up. And so he starts laughing. So he starts training. And then so he looks at us, I had some karate training. So he liked my skills. And so we started training from then. So we started doing competitions. He said, well, if you want to be a great street fighter, you're going to have to fight professional street fighters in the street, but in competition and sparring. Now this starts to become our mentality, is that, can your fighting system work against another professional martial arts champion when there's no rules? So we start this back in 1981. In fact, I go to college with Dan O'Brien. And Dan O'Brien simply was, one of the greatest triathlons of all time, or decathlons of all time. So I used to walk around campus with I've made up this fighting suit, catcher's face mask, catcher's chest protector, elbow pads, volleyball pads, shin guards. I cut gloves off of football, the gloves back in the 80s where they had the gloves for the football players, and you cut off the fingers. Mm-hmm. So you can grapple. So that's our fighting suit. So we start learning how to fight and doing full contact back then. That was called full contact karate. And so full contact street fight, because full contact karate was more or less kickboxing. So Dan O'Brien says, who fights like this? I said, man, we getting ready for the street. What street? You're in Moscow, Idaho, man. Ain't no streets in Moscow, Idaho, right? So we start getting ready. We start add that to our training. And then I go to a fight, what's called a full contact karate fight, and fought a guy and knocked him out in 52 seconds. And I'll never forget the moment, because it was a bright light and everything slowed down. Like, I could see everybody. I could see everybody, but everybody wasn't moving. And I was looking around. And so I remember thinking at that time, I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Even though I, still play basketball for the university, I didn't really care about it as much. I wanted to fight every time. So that was the moment. So that had been the fall of 1982, fall of 1981. Okay.
So yeah. As I started off playing baseball, it was a nice little shortstop, which I should have kept playing. Mm-hmm. That's the money. Yeah. I played point guard early, and then when I really went out to play like actual little league Pop Warner football with pads, helmet, I don't want to do nothing else like that. Yeah. There's something about that sport, and that's probably I'm assuming that's how you felt about the fighting. That no, it's just like the ultimate high. And when you're running, I used to tell people all the time, like when we're doing introductions, you know, right before the game is about to start, and they announce your name, and you in the tunnel, and then you run out, and there's 60,000 and people going ape shit, you know, 31 from Fresno State, like there's nothing that can ever replace that feeling. It's like crazy, and I'm trying. In my mind, when I watch 300, I kind of think like that's what they were feeling. Like
Yeah.
go out in that Coliseum or that stadium, and you getting into combat, like that's what it just is. Something that does something to you. It just attracts you to it. So was that how you felt?
Well, not necessarily, kind of like that, but here's what happened. I started to get disillusioned in team sports because when I played at Fairfax High School, we were supposed to go to, we were favored to go state my senior year. And my teammates get high, get drunk, and we wind up losing to Wilson High School. Bunch of small little Mexican kids ran us out the gym and beat us by 20 points. And I lost a lot of scholarship offers in that because we had a horrible night that night, right? And I remember saying I hate team sports, right? So same thing, go to college. I figure I'm gonna shake it off, go to college. We get to the NCAA tournament and we're playing, we get to the Sweet 16, we're playing University of Pittsburgh. They got big Sam Clancy. Now, some of you guys don't know Sam Clancy. Sam was about 6'7", 6'8", and he was a ripped, like kind of like 275 kind of dude, jump out the gym. And so we was battling up there, and I was all but a $190 back then, but I could battle, right? So coach takes me out in overtime and puts another freshman in. He makes a mistake. Sam Clancy pushes him out, tips it in, and dunks it or something like that, and they win by 1 point overtime. So now keep this in mind. I got my Boston Celtics legs in the garbage can. They long gone. We're in the tournament. This is March. I had a chance. If we win that game, we play North Carolina in the finals. We had a bye. And that was when they had James Worthy. That was a year before Michael Jordan got there. So I'm thinking, if we get to these guys, oh man, I get a chance to show that I can ball and maybe get back to the league or something like that. Get some notoriety to the league. We lose, right? So all the hopes are gone because we was Idaho, with Cinderella team kind of thing like that, right? So I said to myself, I hate team sports. I hate them. I hate it. And then so that leads into me getting into the fight, getting into this, and then all of a sudden realizing that team sports didn't allow me to express myself because there was always somebody holding me back, whether it be a coach. And I always had a coach, you know, like when I played Pop Warner football, my mother had me, I got introduced to, my father was almost 6'11", about 6'10 and a half, 6'11", okay? So everybody thinks my dad got me into basketball. No, he facilitated. My mom was the one that got me in basketball because when I played Pop Warner football, I was too heavy because my mom bought me a weight set the year earlier so I can lift weights. The most cement weights, you know, you lift, I'm lifting, and we're lifting all summer. That's why I used to love summer because we get out of school June, July, and August, and you can train for 3 months, and you ready when end of August, September come, you ready. So I always loved the summer because you could train. So I put on some muscle in that, and so I got too heavy for the Pee-wees, and they wouldn't let me play that year. So I said, Mom, why can't I play? She says, you too heavy, son. So I started crying, and my mother said, quit that crying, boy. And I said, Mom, they won't let me play. So she says, what about that sport over there? So what? Basketball. She goes, you don't have to have a weight class. You don't have to be, they don't care about your weight. They care about you tall, how tall you are. So I was tall as a little kid. So I started playing basketball. So that's how I got in. I was a football guy first. I was a both-way guy, offensive and defensive guy. That's me. A nose tackle on wide receiver. You know, so
nose tackle on wide receiver.
Because see, me, it was the contact. So it's the contact. Yeah. See, I was the first guy to bull in the ring and the last guy to bull in the ring, because that's how you put your toughness. I don't even know if, you remember bull in the ring as a kid? Yeah, bull in the ring, man. That's my. Yeah.
They outlawed it now.
Oh, they outlawed bull in the ring? See, so that's what I'm talking about.
When I was coming up, we had that.
Oh, okay.
You get in that middle, and then you chopping your feet. And they whistle. Everybody taking a shot, or the Oklahoma drill.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, those are my things. So that prepared me for contact. So later on, when I get into fighting, it's no thing because we grew up street fighting anyway. We grew up bare knuckles anyway, because people forget karate back then, they didn't have no gloves. You couldn't bring no boxing gloves, no karate gloves to karate sparring gloves and come out to 1975. And if they did it, and they went to the adults before they went to the kids. So we were using bare knuckle. That's why we had to do push-ups on our knuckles every day, because when we sparred, we had contact to the face. And it was bare knuckle back then as kids. I remember my face got cut up in karate class by my cousin, who was a girl, and she was a green belt. They gave belts out to kids. And so she was a green belt, and she beat me up. And I wouldn't tap out. That's she goes, yield. I wouldn't yield. She beat the snot out of me, beat the brakes off me. I would not give up. And she kicked me in, and we fought for 2 hours. And she beat me. She had me in a corner down, just going to work, give me the business, right? So I go to school the next day, and they call the police and tell the police to come in and say, hey, this child is being abused. And I said, no, it's from karate class. And they go, there ain't no karate class like that, because everybody thought back then it was Chuck Norris karate, because Chuck Norris karate was like that. Because Chuck Norris taught karate in our neighborhood where my dad lived. My mom said, we ain't going over to Chuck Norris karate. And I hate to say it like this. She says, what do white boy know about fighting in the street? She said like that. I said, Mom, that's Chuck Norris, man. He fought Bruce Lee. I mean, that's my Chuck Norris, Mom. We got to take. So she let me take one class with Chuck Norris. And then we went to the hood over there. She said, man, and so that's kind of how that started a little bit for me. So when contact came in, and I was able to get hit and sparring, it allowed me to express myself. Going back to the original question, what was it like to change sports? It was something that I had realized that I've been playing the wrong sport the whole time. So basketball got me to where I needed to be to get to because I had great coaches to help facilitate my martial arts training and early career that I would not have otherwise had. And so from there, by that facilitation helped me grow as a fighter, as a martial artist, while I was playing ball in college. So here's the moment my instructor said, he goes, and I was mad because, Michael Jordan came out. And then when Michael Jordan came out the next year, I said, oh, man. And I remember seeing this guy, man. I remember this guy jumped from the dotted circle underneath sideways. And he dunked. I says, man, that's the greatest basketball player in the history of the league right now. That kid's still in college. So everybody started seeing that, because we thought, Magic changed the game first in 78, 79. Then Michael changed it 3 years later, or say 5 years later, 4 years later, Michael changed it. So you had to be a cross between Magic and Michael. And there was a whole lot of guys that came out in 84. So I said, dang. So my martial arts instructor said, hey, you might not make the NBA, but he said, if you train hard and discipline yourself in martial arts, he said, you could become a world champion. There's no doubt in my mind. And so that was what it was a personal thing, a personal expression that martial arts allowed me that other sports did not, because I had 4 other teammates, or 10 other teammates, or 8 other teammates on the baseball diamond or on the soccer field, same thing. Fighting gave me something that team sports couldn't give me. So once I decided that I ain't playing no more, after Don Munson left Idaho, I said, man, I'm gonna just fight for now. So I was traveling, going to the internationals, and went to the Battle of Atlanta when I was in college, which was a huge karate tournament. Used my scholarship check to get a plane ticket to go down to the Battle of Atlanta, teaching private. I was doing private lessons really before private lessons were a thing for martial arts guys. And so I flew down to Battle of Atlanta, flew down to LA to all the karate tournaments, and fighting against all the top karate champions while I was still finishing my studies up at college. So that's kind of how that's how I transitioned into fighting. It wasn't necessarily something that happened in a vacuum, more or less. It's like I finally decided, said, this is what I love to do. And people don't understand the difference between their dream and their passion. Dream, right? Playing the NBA, Dr. J. I remember telling my dad one time, I said, Pop, I had twisted my ankle playing basketball, because we had a huge court in the backyard when I lived with my dad, and all the neighborhood kids used to come over. My dad used to bet on kids, and all the old school cats used to come over and bet on kids. This kid can beat that kid. This kid can beat that kid. And they'd be betting on the kids. And if you win, my dad give you $10, $20, something like that, and make you play hard, right? So I twisted my ankle earlier. So we were watching the All-Star game in '76, and that's when the NBA and ABA and NBA had just merged. Dr. J jumps from the foul line. We jump up. Oh man, you see that? Dad, I want to play in the NBA. And my father, I had my foot in a bucket of ice, turned my ankle. My father says, son, you know the difference between amateurs and pros? I said, no, Pop, what is it? He says, pros play hurt.
Yep.
So I taped my ankle up over my sock. And so long story short, I went to start playing ball. That was my dream. I know what it felt like to have a dream. That was my dream to play in the NBA. But then when I got into fighting, I realized how my dream, the difference between having a dream and passion is a different feeling. And I couldn't articulate that too much later. A few years later, I understood that's what I was passionate. I just loved it. I trained. I do all kind of stuff, you know. I couldn't wait to leave basketball practice. I go do my homework and go train, go hit the bag for 10 rounds, something like that. So that's kind of how it was for me. It became a choice because it was a difference between what my dream was and my passion was. And I was passionate about martial arts. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to look at all of the white pages and I used to look at all the karate studios, right? And I knew where every karate studio when I was a little kid growing up. I just love karate. I just read the white pages, you know, and I would listen to the white pages, or I look at the white pages and I knew where every karate school. Now I get into martial arts as a young adult. I know where all those karate studios are now. So I'm reading the karate magazines. I go, oh, I know where that studio is. So I go down there and I hit all these karate studios. I'd be hitting karate studios, 4 studios every day. I said, I'm gonna hit this guy, I'm gonna hit that guy, run this guy, see, oh, that's Master so-and-so, that's so-and-so, so-and-so. And that's how I realized what my passion was. Because my dad got me 2 workouts. They call them trials back then, but they were 2 workouts with the NBA. And my dad said, hey, you know, I can get you a trial with the New Jersey Nets because Paul Silas was the head coach back then. And I said, Pop, you know, I want to fight. He said, what you fighting for? I said, oh, kickboxing. What the hell kickboxing? He said, well, how much money you gonna make? I said, Dad, I'm fighting for a little title. I got my first amateur title. And he says, it's not a big thing, Dad, but it's an amateur title. He said, how much they gonna pay? I said, $50. He goes, so let me tell you, you're gonna turn down tomorrow. You can go fight for $50. Or you go try out for maybe get $200,000 a year playing the NBA, and you gonna go fight for $50? I said, yeah, Pop, I'm gonna go fight for $50. And so that's exactly. So I won, and I was happy. My father didn't speak to me for 3 years.
Hey, you want to know what's funny? I was telling some young people this the other day. I said, some people know very early on what their passion is, and I said, you know, God has blessed each and every one of us with an innate ability. Like everyone on the planet has a superpower. Your job in life is to figure out what that said superpower is and max it out. And your God is to max it out and share it, right? Mm-hmm. So I was telling somebody this stuff that I said, you know what the problem is in the world? 90 to 95% of the people in the world, they are busting their ass and going crazy trying to do something that they want to do that they're not good at.
Yep.
Ignoring the thing that they're blessed with just ability to do.
Right, exactly.
They want to sing and can't hold a damn note to save their life, but they're very good with numbers.
Yeah.
Go work at a bank. Go be in because that's what you're good. That's your ability, right? So just the same way you were looking at the white pages for the dojos. There was no internet when I grew up. I'm 42, so I was born in the 70s. In the 70s, mm-hmm. I would collect baseball, basketball, football cards. And you remember the little plastic stuff? So there was no internet or no NFL network or none of that stuff. So what I would do is I would turn the cards over and memorize all the information. You know, Sanders, 6'1", Fort Myers, Florida State, 3 sports start. Like I just knew I was like facts, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's when I knew that was my passion, when I would sit there at 5 or 6 years old and watch the Chicago Bears, and rest in peace, Walter Payton, the greatest player, in my opinion, to ever play running back, and watch Sweetness and be like, that's what I want to do. Daddy, I'm going to play NFL. You understand what I'm saying? So I get it, man. And it's a dope, surreal feeling when you know that young, like, yo, this is what I want to do. And you finally figure out that passion. Like, oh, come on, right?
But here's something that my instructor taught me about that when I finally figured out, because I was still in college when I figured out what passion meant. Now, even though you have passion, you have what's called an ability or a talent. Okay. Remember you talked about scripture, right? So now keep in mind that when the scripture talks about the parable of the talents, what they're referring to is the ability to generate wealth. What can you do to generate more wealth? You got one talent, you got two talents, only had three, right? So what happens is that it was not enough just to have talent. One, two, was not just enough to recognize that you had a talent. It was important, also more important, the most important thing was to develop that talent and convert that talent into a skill.
Yes.
And so when I was around celebrities, I had a chance to see, as a bodyguard, I was doing the bodyguard thing in the late 80s when I got out of college. I had a chance to see celebrities in their gift, but I watched them work on their talent. Like there was a time I did the Rhythm Nation tour with Janet Jackson for a while. She wanted to need she had some troubles with bodyguards, so I got called in by Stevie Wonder to say, hey, I would need you to go work for Janet. And another guy that who was doing head of security for Janet, he ran the security team. And so I used to work for him before. So he had got me, he told me, hey, we need you to come over and work for Janet. So Janet was having problems with her dancers. And this is on the Rhythm Nation tour. Now, people don't recognize, and you too young to think, some of these people listening don't think of the Rhythm Nation tour. Go look up Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation tour and look up and look at the time period in which they were doing that kind of dancing and singing and the choreography that they had back then. So I'll never forget this day. So she was having difficulty with the dancers. Her fiance at the time name was Alonzo. And I can't pronounce his name, but this guy was cold, man. This guy he was a cold choreographer, right? But they just couldn't figure it out. They had to audition new dancers, right? So all of a sudden, I got word. They said, hey, man, Michael's coming in. So at the time, everybody who knew Mike, we said, Tyson? Because that's what we thought back then. It was like, what Mike Tyson doing? No, he said, Michael. And I'm thinking, Jordan, right? Right? Because that's only who you know, Michael, right?
The GOAT.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, these guys bust into we're in New York, and these guys bust into the rehearsal studio, right? And they had tactical uniforms. And back then, you really wasn't supposed to have a gun in New York, but if you were with the right people, you could have a gun in New York because you had to protect your client, right? So I didn't have no piece on me at that time. So I'm like, oh man, I got caught. These guys busting there with tactical stuff, tactical gear on, not gear on, but they had tactical shoes and boots and stuff on. And they started coming in. I mean, out. So I go rush to Janet, and they go, no. That's Michael's first team. So her brother, Michael, was coming in. Not Michael Jordan, not Mike Tyson. Michael Jackson was coming in, right? And so he had a perimeter team. He had which was outside the building. He had an interior team, which is inside the building, stairwells, and then had a close proximity team. And so all these people were around Michael, and they kind of like shuffled around Michael, and you couldn't even get to Michael. Sat down, boom, boom, boom. So we sitting there, and then all of a sudden, we started talking. And I said, man, what's going on? What's going on? He said, I don't know, man. I don't know. This and that. And all of a sudden, Michael gets up, right? And he snaps his fingers, right? Now, Michael does his pop thing. And all the dancers are told to get up and start rehearsing. Long story short, let me make this long story short. They rehearsed for 36 hours.
Wow.
30. And I'm telling you, here's the moment for me. When you have a chance to be that close to perfection, because Michael Jackson was perfection. He did everything perfect, right? I'm talking every move they had names for it. It was incredible, right? And then if you go look at Janet Jackson's, the last part of her tour, you see how crisp that stuff was. Mm-hmm. That's because, man, they were on it, man. And so that's when I realized this is, okay, if you're going to be great at something, not good at something, you're going to be great at your passion. Because this is where people don't take their talent and their gift to the level that they need to, is they don't know how to develop it. They know they have it, but they don't know how to develop it. And when I mean they don't know how to develop it, what do I need to do to develop my talent that I may need assistance from somebody else outside of different realms that's going to help me develop my talent. What discipline, meaning not just discipline, the self-discipline, but also discipline. What training regimen do I need to do to become good at what I need to become good at, right? I need to become great at my gift. And a lot of people that the outliers that you see are great at their gift, while some people, they never maximize their gift. Why? Because they didn't know how to become great at it, right? They didn't know how to develop it. And that's the moment that I saw, I says, you know what? Now I get it. And martial arts was one of those things that you become great at because why? It allowed you to develop your own gift, and it was up to you if you decided to develop it or not. And that's the beautiful thing about martial arts, is because if you understand the character nature of martial arts, in a sense, you will be able to understand what it takes to be great at it. You know, there's a lot of great martial arts guys. So I came in a generation where you had so many great martial artist guys that were still in the 80s. Bruce had only been dead maybe, 10 years, in 86, 12, let me see, 73, 83. So yeah, so 10, or excuse me, maybe 13 years, 14 years, something like that. When I got out of college in the bodyguard world, but when I was in it, everything was still, you could see how great Bruce Lee was at his talent, at his gift. So I started studying people who was great at what they do. And I continued to do that. Okay, how does this guy get this? How did that guy get that? How did that guy get this? How did that guy become great at that? So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to do, was look at what can I become great at in martial arts. And so what I want to do, I said, I want to be the greatest Kempo fighter that there is in the Kempo system. That was my goal, to become great. Not only was I wanting to do martial arts, but what you going to do with that? And here's what my instructor told me. Can you be great at doing it, but also teaching it? Because there's a lot of great teachers, but they can't fight. And there's a lot of fighters who can't teach. A great instructor is a guy who can teach and fight at the same time. So that's kind of where I start setting myself up for success. Is how do I learn how to do it, but how do I learn how to teach it? And then you have to go out there and learn all these other things that made it inclusive. So when you get to UFC 1, now all of a sudden you have permission pretty much to go study everything else that there is in there, because now there's more out there to learn. So what I realized is, okay, you can be great at martial arts, because that's really subjective, right? Unless you even if you win a UFC championship belt, right? UFC belt, does that really mean that you're the best fighter in the world? Well, maybe, but there's some other guys out there that we haven't seen yet. And that's kind of what we don't know. We don't know. We never seen, I would like to see Fedor come to the UFC. I like to see his brother Alexander come to the UFC in the heavyweight division. That was a different ball. Those are different. Those are other cats out there, like Raymond Daniels, Michael Page. There's a lot of guys out there. I just don't know. If we can actually say somebody is the best in the world. UFC is the biggest promotion, but are you the best fighter in the world? We haven't had that fight yet. There's just too many cats out there, too many dudes out there.
So Zane, before we get too far into the UFC, Marsh, you talked about memorizing sports cards. And I did the same thing with hockey cards. And my dad used to give me shit for that. He'd say, boy, what the hell are you doing? Waste your time memorizing these cards for? What do that's not going to serve you anything in life. And my dad's mom was German. My dad's dad was Russian. And my dad ruled my childhood and our house with an iron fist. Dead serious. I'd see the kids playing street hockey, and I just wanted to go play hockey with the kids and hang out and shit. And my old man had me doing electrical work with him every weekend, because my dad's favorite thing to do was work. And I swear to God, I feel like I missed out on my childhood. And I was talking to my counselor about this, and he said, a lot of your triggers and a lot of your rage right now is dealing back with your childhood. But what I want to talk about is how these kids these days are being raised, and the lack of discipline, the lack of anything. It just seems like a big giant free-for-all,
Well, I think that's our generation's fault. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I always to put it like this: kids didn't ask to be born. And I'm gonna tell you, I watch it. There was a show, and I want to say it was on HBO, and I can't be 100% sure, but there is a show on HBO, a segment that Brian Gumbel did, and I couldn't believe that they actually called it that. But I remember watching it several times. It was called The Wussification of America.
Real sports.
Called like wussies, wussification of America. Yeah, exactly. And so I saw that episode, and here's what I can realize. I can attest to why that happened to some degree. Now, I'm not a psychologist or, or anybody, a social worker, anything like that. But what we see today is evidence of my generation, because I was born in 62, so I'm 58 now. I'll be 59 this year. And so my generation said, we're not going to raise these kids like we were raised, because mom and daddy it may have been right for us, but it was wrong for us to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of the things, and that's one part of it. The other part of it is that depending on what age you are, college, people taught you to go get a job instead of go get an education, because while, the whole philosophy was, while somebody's going to college, studying the history of the past, people are going to trade schools and start working on their future. So that was one thing too that changed a lot of dynamics, how kids viewed education back then. So they were given choices and options. We weren't given choices and options. You either had to go to school or you had to go to work. And we knew we didn't go to work because we knew that meant we were going to be, some labor worker or some other worker that we didn't want to be. And they always taught us, you got to use your brain and not your back. And if you don't learn to use your brain, you're going to lose your back. That's why my father really honed in education first, basketball, second, use basketball to get your education. So when I went to college, I had almost 345 credits. I like 340 credits or 42 or something like that. Because I started studying everything. Once I found out what my passion was and my gift in martial arts, I was a martial arts instructor in college. In fact, I came out what was called karate size before Billy Blanks came out with Taibo. People don't realize Billy Blanks was the creator of Taibo, but Billy Blanks was not the creator of the karate fitness group exercise class or movement. The person who created it all was Faye Stinson, and she lives here in actually Arizona. And then there was another person that created, so she was karate. She was aerobics, and I became karate size. And then everybody else, Cheryl Wheeler, a bunch of other guys, people started, and then Billy didn't start Taibo until the late 90s, early 90s. I know he tells the story differently, but that's not actually what happened. Why I mention all of that is because I had a chance to see how the kids were growing up, right? And so what happened is the way the kids were growing up, it was based on, we're not going to do that to our kids. We're not going to do it. For example, I was telling the story, my mom and I were chopping up on Mother's Day. And I told her about how, thank you for raising me and this and that and that and this and that. I said, Mom, I love you. Thank you for doing this and being hard on me and doing this. She said, hard on you? She said, boy, I tore your ass up. I wasn't just hard on you. So I tell this story that I always wanted to be a sniper. I wanted to be a sniper. I wanted to be a marksman. That's kind of, TV show I was watching called Police Story back then. So I was watching, and the one sniper's name was Frazier. I thought it was kind of cool. So I wanted to be like him, right? So I was shooting. I put in arts and crafts, I made a spitball rifle with a scope, so that when I could read my books, when we do exploratory classes, when we were reading, I could read my book, and I would lower my book, and I could look through my scope, and I could hit people with a spit wad, and then raise my book up. Nobody'd be the wiser. So I'm doing that, right? And all of a sudden I lower my book and everybody's looking at me. So I pretend like I'm doing work and doing this and that, and everybody keep looking at me. Now I probably was in the 5th grade. So the teacher clears his throat, and I look back and my mother was there, right? And my mother said, boy, I told you if I ever caught you in class messing up, I'm going to beat your butt in front of the whole class. So she told me, get up to the front desk, drop your drawers, stick your butt out. And she told me up with an extension cord, and the teacher said, Mrs. Frazier, we don't do that here. And she said, shut up. You get some next. I got a belt for you too. Now, imagine that today, right? That my mom would have, she'd be in prison, right? But what it taught us was, discipline in a way that we had to take accountability. We had to take responsibility for it. So we said, as growing up, I remember saying when I was 20, I ain't gonna raise my kids like, or my first question, we ain't gonna raise our kids the way we're raised up. We ain't gonna do this. We're gonna let them participate. We're gonna let them compete. I remember the conversations that we used to have in a social setting and in college said, we ain't gonna do this. We're not gonna do that. If they wanna have fun, we're gonna let them have fun. We said that we had no idea the implications that were gonna come 30 years later. We had no idea. We're a bunch of idealists.
That's funny. I got a quick story. So you remember the movie The Last Dragon?
Yeah. Show enough.
It's show enough, right? So the movie just came out. This had to be around 85, 86. I was about 6 or 7. So we cutting up. We in a Safeway in Rock Ridge. It's like a little area in North Oakland. So, back then you spend, $300 at the grocery store, you're going to have food for like 3 months because it was back then, right? We got 3-4 baskets full of food. So me, my brother, my little brother, and my cousin, we in there cutting up. And my mama like, hey, you already know them stories when you went in the store.
Yeah.
Hands in your pocket, don't touch nothing, don't ask.
Exactly right.
So we in there running around. We just real ratchet, all in the store. My mama was like, hey, y'all better stop. So it's, my dad in there, he just being calm. So we find about an hour done shopping. We get to the car to put the groceries in the car. My dad was a slender dude, I would say, very handsome, 6'2". But those hands, as we got into the car, big hands grabbed us by the back of our shirts and pulled us out the car. His belt came off like pootie time. He is going to work. He beating us in the parking lot, broad daylight at the Safeway shopping center. So about the 5th or 6th downstroke, a white woman comes over and grabs my daddy hand. Stop beating those kids. And my daddy looked at her and said, B-I-T-C-H, if you don't let go of my hand, I'm gonna whoop your ass. Off and called the police. And fortunately enough, black cops showed up, but this is in the mid 80s. So there was kind of like, Mr. Marsh, you can do what you want in the confines of your own home. Just don't chastise kids in public. I say all that to say, to go along, piggyback on what you just said. I think that was good. I got a lot of ass whoopings. I was a man. And I think it shaped me as a man because even growing up, trying to feel myself, you stealing cars, you trying to dabble in and doing little street stuff. I had the wherewithal to say, you know what? I got one foot in, but I'm not going to go all the way in because if my daddy find out, he's going to kill me. So fear, respect to the point where for me, I thought, because I honestly think this to this day, that kept me from straying so far to where I could have become a statistic because I didn't have that respect/fear factor of my father.
Yeah.
And I think what has happened is in society, everything is wrong. Kids got a voice. When we was told something, you didn't have a voice.
No, you didn't have a voice.
You were my way or hit the highway.
Yeah.
And I think, I think for me, as a parent of a 19-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I have 2 college degrees, I use some of my old school values I learned, but since I was educated at a higher level, and I'm a sociology major for my bachelor's, I took a bunch of courses and classes, and I learned, you know what, damn, we was treated kind of wrong.
Yeah.
I still use variants of what I known, old school, getting raised, and then some of the more technological stuff or the psychology part of it.
Right.
I say all that to say, I think we deviated too far away from there.
Yeah.
Because, these kids, they don't respect the adults. Remember in the neighborhood when you was growing up?
Yeah.
On the corner could whoop your ass and then call your mama and daddy, be like, hey, he was cutting up. I got him.
Yeah.
Man,
And it's not just that. I work with people in various fields and stuff like that. And I've had some people that work in social work and law enforcement and school district, and they're all saying the same thing. It's like I had a friend of mine tell me she's retired from the police department now. She just retired last year. And she was expressing to me that in Arizona, they had changed the rules as to where they break up the California gangs. So what they do is they bring the shot callers to Arizona. So they leave the gangs basically leaderless, right? They no direction. Okay. So now what that had created what she was telling me is that you have this group of gangs that doing out there what we call putting in work, robbing and doing whatever they're going to do, right? And so, but they have no leader, right? They have no leadership. There's no rules. So she was telling me that a lot of these kids that are representing gangs aren't from those gangs. They're individual people who claim to be that gang. So she was telling me a story that she went to these shot callers and said, hey, what's going on? Say, hey, and they were talking about, hey, this guy did this guy did, who's this guy? I said, I don't know this guy. He's representing your colors, representing your street. And they told him, and the shot callers were saying, hey, them kids, we can't even control them kids no more. They don't even listen to us. He goes, they're out there doing stuff. They won't even they don't take the time to get jumped in no more. They just put on a rag, put on some colors, and going out there putting in work, and we can't control them. So you kind of look at it, when you look at one side of the street, look at the other side, you see these law enforcement kids that are young now, they're getting on the job. They don't know how to quite handle this. If you can't do what your mom and daddy told you, or you've never been disciplined, how you gonna really go out there and enforce the law? You can't. As soon as a kid look at you sideways and say, no, you ain't gonna do this, what you gonna do? Well, you see, that's what you see out there today. So a lot of it has to do with the kids are sensitive now, and they don't know how to take responsibility because, like you said, Dante, they can sit behind a computer, cell phone, talk crap to so-and-so, and then I don't think it's okay. I had a kid that got beat up at school. And I teach the kids little boxing and stuff like that. I own a title boxing franchise here in Phoenix. And so I teach the kids how to do self-defense, and boxing is a sport, and weight, life, fitness, do some weight, kind of thing like that. Try to stay away from the self-defense now, because today with the MMA, self-defense, teaching kids self-defense is very, very tricky. Because I was teaching a group of kids some self-defense stuff, which basically was wrestling and grappling and stuff like that. And I got the principal calling me, telling me my kids are suplexing people in the bathroom. And I'm going, oh my goodness. And these kids are getting hurt. Not my kid hurt somebody, but these kids are beating kids up, suplexing kids on and just taking this MMA, choking kids out and then beating them up. So you can't teach kids MMA for self-defense because you're basically giving them a weapon without a license. Right. It's like giving them a car without a driver's license, or not teaching them, giving them teach them how to go hunting or something like that, give them a gun, something like that, without proper training. You just can't do it, right? So these kids today are having these difficult challenges because they don't have that sense of respect anymore. And so this kid gets beat up at school. I said, hey, what happened? Your mom told me you got beat up at school. He goes, well, I said, what happened? He goes, well, I was talking about this kid. I was talking about this kid's mama. I told him this, and that. And the guy said, okay. And it was, white kid, and he was talking to this black kid. I says, let me get this straight. Well, who's this kid? So-and-so, so-and-so. I said, and he was talking about his mom. I said, hey, kid, that ain't okay. I said, but why did he beat you up? Why did it take so long for you to beat him up? So come to find out, he was talking about his mama over the phone. Texted him, your mama this, your mama that, da, da, da. Thought it was funny, right? So the kid finally saw him at school, beat him up. Mm-hmm. And the principal said, hey, why did you think it was okay to say that about his mama and then look at him face to face and think that he wasn't going to do something to you? Oh, I thought it'd be funny. And it was, and so I was telling this kid, I says, you can't do this stuff. And so they don't know any better. And because why? The mentors are gone. Yeah. The coaches are gone. They took PE away. See, where we learned, I was part of the National Youth Sports Program in LA. So you had Ronnie Lott, you had Marcus Johnson, you had, Reggie T, you had all of those guys that were playing ball in the NBA or in the NFL or playing in college, USC, UCLA kind of stuff, come in and mentor us. Yeah. Where have all of our mentors gone? We don't have no mentors to these kids anymore, right? So they don't have any guidance, and truth be told, they had attention span so short. You can't teach them that no way anyway, right? So it's a lot of factors, guys, that why we see the kids the way they are today. But like I said, I look at my generation. I can remember the conversations in my sociology class in college. We said we ain't gonna raise our kids like we were raised. And like you said, Dante, we went so far to the other side that we had no idea what we were talking about. And we had no idea what the consequences were going to be for the participation trophies, for telling them how great they were, to try to pump them up rather than let them earn it. We didn't know. We just didn't know.
Dante, my dad would say, which one do you want? My dad was left-handed. He'd say 6 months or death. And then would say, go ahead, call the cops. I don't give a shit. And I heard it all the time.
My daddy told me, hey, if you ever call the police, you better find some place else to live, because you will never live here. And I mean, for me, once again, I just feel like when we allow, because there's parents that really aren't parents. They're older brothers and sisters. They treat their kids with that same type of relationship.
Yeah.
And I had to make it clear to my son, who's now a young adult at 19, yo, you ain't gotta like me. You ain't gotta be. I'm not your friend. I'm your father.
Right.
So this is the deal. You're gonna follow directions and do what I ask you to do, because what I'm asking you to do is very well within reason. I'm not asking you to do something you cannot do. It's simple respect stuff. And I think, giving kids your phone, like I never let my kids when they were smaller play with my cell phone and give them iPads and little devices. You're creating a shortened, attention span. You're giving your kids ADHD without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to having a kid read a book? Like whatever happened to, like, now if you go outside, and we talked about this last time, Zane, like, man, Oakland Parks and Rec, that's where I learned everything I knew. And drug dealers out there, those were the guys buying our uniforms.
Right.
They were some of the worst people in the neighborhood. They were actually doing some good things. I mean, if you will, buying shoes, making sure the kids, hey man, get your ass inside. This ain't for you. You go play sports.
Right.
We don't have that anymore. And what I do is I do a mentor program. I mentor all my athletes from start to finish. It's not, you just, their parents aren't, they aren't just paying me for training. They get way more than what they pay me for. And they always got my line. Like even when out of high school, college, I've had young men call me 1 o'clock in the morning because they don't feel comfortable talking to their parents.
Yeah.
And the type of relationship, that's where I came from.
Yeah.
So a village. And we, especially when you talk about African-American men, people who look like you and I, it's a thing called positive imagery. I work in the school too. These young men have, and I never would have thought, man, I'm never gonna be no teacher, no coach, no, like I never looked at myself like that, right?
Right.
God has a funny way of allowing you to have some of your selfish wants and desires and then bring you full circle to doing what your purpose is.
Sure. Yeah, and 100%.
So it's just like we have to get back to creating a infrastructure to where we're getting these young people to get back to having self-respect and respect for others. Because
right
now it's just no respect, and moms can't be their daughter's partner.
Right.
They can't be their son's partner. You have to establish. There's a hierarchy here. I am the alpha male. I'm it's Lion King. You Simba. So it's a process.
Yeah. You guys mentioned that about calling the police. I mean, y'all lucky. That's how you can tell how young y'all guys are, right? Because so my sister, she passed away now. She's gone, been about 6-7 years now. She was in high school back in 1985. She was graduating, right? And tell you something about my sister, myself, and my other brother. There was our doctors when we were born. We all had the same doctor growing up, and he gave us his aptitude test. We were about 5 years old when we were, and they put you in the room, and they put you in a room full of toys and different objects, and they literally watch you play for about 2 hours, and they give you an assessment. They come out and told my mother, and my sister and I were 9 years apart. Then they told my mother, said, hey, you got to watch Zane, because if you don't watch him, he's either going to do something great for humanity or he's going to become a master criminal.
Mm.
Okay. Same thing to my sister 9 years later. You better watch her because she's going to do something great for society or she's going to be a master criminal. So my sister wanted to go out with some friends. My mom had told her no. And then she lived in Diamond Bar, California, which is poor. My sister had her own room. She had a dog. She had a yard, all that kind of stuff. So because her mom got remarried. So I'm involved playing college. My brother's, doing this thing at, his job and stuff. So I didn't get a chance to watch my younger sister grow up because we were 9 years apart. So my mom tells me the story that my sister started back talking her. And my mom said, excuse me. And she goes, you heard me. And my mom beat the brakes off my sister, right? Da-da-da, like she did us, right? Now that's not. Now remember, she's 9 years different. There's a reason. I mean, there's gonna be I'm gonna come back to that later. So my mom is sitting there. My sister go up to her room, and then my mom gets that knock at the door. Boom, 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 boom. Now, anytime somebody knock at that door like that, it's only one person, the police. Because if you have homeboys knock at your door like this, hey man, don't be knocking on my door like the police. Don't be playing like that, right? Yeah. So my mama knew who it was. She goes, what the police knocking on my door for? She goes, hello? She goes, is there Erica Frazier here? She goes, yeah, that's my daughter. Well, we got a call here about attempted murder. She goes, what? Attempted murder? And then she says, and they asked, can we come in? She said, come on in. Ain't no. She goes, well, your daughter, she here? She says, yeah, she upstairs in her room. Well, we got a 911 call from her saying that she was you tried to kill her. It was attempted murder. She goes, well, I guess I could because I whooped her ass. That's what I did. And so my sister came down. There she is. I want her arrested for murder because she whipped me. And my sister crying, right? And the police sat my mama down and said, hey, Miss Frazier, you cannot, by this time she changed, her name was Larry, she says, you cannot whoop your daughter like that no more. And so, hey, wait a minute, I raised that child, carried that child, I bore that child, I'll whoop her any way I want you. She says, no, that's a crime. You go to jail for that. So the police sat down for an hour telling my mother, you can't whoop nobody like that no more. You can't do that. I said, I did that to my first boy, my second boy, my sisters, I had to raise them. I whooped everybody. I said, everybody get their ass whooped in my house. The police said, you can't do it.
Right. So
2 weeks later, the sheriff department, LA County Sheriff Department, see my sister get into a car, and they got this one car under surveillance. And it's a bunch of guys who just got out of prison who's selling drugs to high school kids. And so they said, ain't that Frazier girl? And they go, yeah. She get into the car, the very same car that the sheriff had under surveillance. So they bust a car and stuff like that. My sister, she won't be gangster now. She gonna say, take me to jail. I don't give a shit. Take me there. So they arrested my sister, put her in the car, and she's kicking the police cage and being all belligerent and stuff like that. And here's what's funny. You had a white police officer, you had a black police officer, right? Sheriff deputy. So the black sheriff deputy was telling my sister to calm down and stuff like this. And a white officer didn't say much. And then my sister started spitting and talking all this other da-da-da-da. And the sheriff deputy said, you know what? I know what we're going to do. She goes, yeah, what you going to do? Take me to jail? You going to beat me? This and that? No. Drove up to my mother's house. And she goes, that's right. You better let me go. You better let me go. This and this and that. Right? And so knock on my mom's door. Mom said, yeah. She goes, we got to arrest you. She goes, I said, well, yeah, I can't whoop her. Take her to jail. She goes, no, we got a better idea. So can we come inside? I said, yeah. They took the handcuffs off and says, we want to watch you beat her ass.
Wow. Yes.
And so they said, my mom said, what? She goes, y'all just told, what's this, entrapment? Y'all gonna try to send me to jail? Beat my own daughter? She says, no, because she's belligerent and she needs her ass whooped. And this is the white police officer said this, not the black dude. The white cat said it, right? And my mama went upstairs and beat her from the bottom of her feet to the top of her head. And the sheriff deputy told her, my sister, every time we see you messing up, we're gonna bring you right here and we're gonna let your mama do it again.
Yes. Village.
And I thought that's LA County Sheriff Deputy, right? And something happened. My sister did something that I would have never thought doing. She ran away from home the next day. And we didn't see her for years. For years. We see our family reunions and things like that. She got her GED because my sister tested genius, so she could do her homework and her schoolwork in class and AP classes, and she had scholarships to a lot of HBUs. She didn't want to take them. So my sister wound up getting in drugs and doing all kind of other stuff and gang banging. And she grew up with, she used to run. She used to go to school with Nicole Richie and the Kardashians and Paris Hilton. They all used to run together back in LA. So my sister was in that generation group with those kids. So they all grew up together. So I'll be partying all the time because who's gonna say no to them kids, right? Them, especially that group of kids. So fast forward, my sister wound up having a stroke, and she wound up having to go back and live with my mother like some 20, 30 years later. And my sister's kind of a little disabled, and she talks, and she finally starts to come around, gave her life, rededicated her life back to Christ. And so before she passed away, I said, can I ask you something, sis? I said, what made you do what you do? And she goes, big bro. She goes, her name was Felicia. She said, I was doing so good in junior varsity soccer. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to get a scholarship and play soccer. I thought that's what I was going to do. And I said, well, what happened? She goes, well, I was winning trophies, and I was doing that. And I was on the starting. I was #1 player on my junior varsity soccer team. Went up to varsity. Here's the moment now. Now she in high school. This is 1985. I want to show you this right here, guys. This is what we're talking about. Why did these kids stray like this? Here's the moment. And I'm going to tell you what it is, okay? She said, I got cut on I couldn't make varsity. I said, well, why did you try it again and again and again? That's the moment. Sensitive, got your feelings hurt, overcome adversity, perseverance, persistence, patience. They know nothing about that. So my sister said, I decided at that moment I was going to be the baddest gangster I could be. And that's what she did. And so that's what moment is. That here's the moment. What was the crooks? What was the thing in the middle that changed us? The kids that one of the things that our generation, the critical mistake we made, we allow children to quit something and not finish it. Mm-hmm. See, the one thing I love about karate, that when I tell parents, put your kids in karate first, you know why? Because it teaches you process. And through process, you get patience. And through patience, you get discipline. This is why I started learning in college I want to use martial arts as a human development coach. I said that in college. I go, what's a human development coach? I said, I don't know. I'm making it up, man. I'm going to you teach karate and martial arts, and I'm going to make it a sport. And I'm going to teach self-defense as a sport. And I'm going to make it a tool for personal development. I said this back in the fall of 1981 when I started Karate Size, right? And I started taking aerobics classes and learning how they do aerobics. I noticed some of the moves in aerobics were the same movements in Kempo Karate, which is where I got my belt, my 4th degree black belt in Kempo, and 6th degree black belt, later 6th degree black belt. And so what wound up happening, I started taking the Kempo movements and started putting them together in a routine, which started to teach self-defense. But the way Kempo is done with such speed, you get your heart rate up, and that's where it became cardio. And I said, this is the vehicle that I'm going to use to teach all those character building traits. At the same time, make it fitness and make it a workout, all these different things, so that people can get the opportunity to understand what discipline and success is, and patience and perseverance. Because why? I seen it firsthand. If they don't, that's what it did for me. And I believe if everybody had a chance to take martial arts at some point in time, they would understand what process, patience, and discipline is, because that's what success requires. It demands that, right? So if you don't teach your kids how to, and the other thing is overcome adversity. Mm-hmm. So when I look at my sister, she couldn't overcome her adversity. She couldn't overcome rejection. And so that's why I look at the kids. What do we see the kids today? As soon as somebody says something to them, they're ready to jump in somebody's face until you beat them down, and all of a sudden now they got a pistol, right? And they realize, so anyway, I think that's kind of where we did not effectively teach that. We just didn't want you guys to. We didn't want, because we didn't know how to teach it. If I think about it, we didn't know how to teach it back then, because all we did was the school of hard knocks. Mm-hmm. That's why when the NFL Hard Knocks come on, I crack up. I love that show. Why? Because that's exactly the proper name, Hard Knocks.
But that's life, though.
Yeah.
this is the issue that I have because I'm big on sports psychology. And a lot of the players that I train, I got a slew of guys that have earned Division I scholarships, had their best high school seasons. I got a couple pro guys, and everybody I'm having a hand in their development. They're reaching heights. I don't never take credit for it. That's God, their mom, and their dad. I just changed them. I'm a mechanic. I'm
Right.
going to bring the best out of it.
Right.
But a lot of my training sessions focus a lot on I'm assessing them mentally. I use my sociology degree because it's like confidence.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I think when we started doing the participation trophy deal, you take away for example, real quick, right now, Twitter is huge. A lot of these young athletes, like when I was coming out, I graduated high school in 97, there was no internet. I had a beeper. There was no cell phones. Technology was nowhere near what it is today. So college coaches, similar to how when you came out, they had to physically come to your high school, see you in person to see what it was.
Right.
You couldn't send a huddle tape on a cell phone and I could watch it right then, right?
Right.
So a lot of these kids are so consumed with the attention that they forget putting in the work to actually be what they say I am.
Right.
Let me get a couple highlights, and now all of a sudden I'm a 4-star recruit.
Right. Right.
So the problem is with that is all your life in this day and age, you're being told how great you are. Then when you get to that D1 level, when you step foot on campus, remember the old school movie, The Program?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You just another number. Yeah. All
right.
Going on the recruiting trips, the girls and all the promises, all that's out the window. Because that national letter of intent, and it's time to go to work now. So when we allow, I think social media is a great tool, especially for myself. I use it, in a positive manner for utilizing my platform to use sports to help give these young people a vehicle. Because for me, I'm preaching this operation free education. You're only using this as a vehicle. I was blessed and fortunate to play 12 years of pro football. That's not the reality. I was in an elite 1 percentile. That's all the moon and stars and the planets had to align right for my blessing to happen the way it happened. That's not the reality for 90+% of the population. So I think we do need to get back to kind of like, hey, you don't work, you don't eat. Because now it gives these young people the mindset of, I can't take an elevator to my success. Everybody now, it's McDonald's. Right. And I watched this happen throughout the pandemic. I'm a defensive coordinator at a junior college. So I watched when the pandemic first started, there's no physical in-person things going on. So we had to utilize the Zoom meetings. We started with 70-some players, dog, and ended up with maybe less than 20 throughout the pandemic because what happened? We weren't doing it wasn't instant gratification for them. They couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They didn't know if they were ever going to be able to play football again. Nobody knew how the world was going to, be once this thing passed over, or if it ever was going to pass over. So I say that to say, I look at myself. I had a chip on my shoulder because I didn't get drafted. I was a priority free agent. I was told 4th round on. I sat there and watched the draft for all 2 days and nothing happened. I'm getting phone calls. Where you at? You buy your phone, all that stuff. But I took that as motivation. So as soon as the draft was over, I had 4 or 5 teams calling me so I could figure out, negotiate what's going to be the best fit for me. And I picked the Tennessee Titans, which was a great fit. I say all that to say, I use that as motivation. That was the adversity. I took the rejection, if you will, from not getting my name called, those 250 some odd players. And I said, you know what? I'm just as good, if not better, than some of these guys that did get their name called. And I'm going to make sure every day I'm putting in that work because I got something to prove to myself and to everybody else. So for me, it took on a whole different meaning, like the adversity and to be able to overcome, the obstacles of the inner city to get to where I have gotten. And I think these kids today, they can't see. If they can't see it, and it's not tangible and they could touch it right then and there, they lose interest ASAP.
Yeah, but here's what's interesting about that. See, what we had, you mentioned a good part about seeing it. Scripture is plain. And it talks about where it says, where there is no vision, cast off restraint. Another translation tells you where where there's no vision, the people perish, right? And what is talked about in that scripture there is that in order to see it, in order to be able to have hope, right, to have an expectation, you have to visualize what it is that you want. So now you have to have a desire. You have to say, how do I take the desire of my heart? See, what it is kids don't know what they want anymore. Now, for example, we used to talk, there was a poster came out in the 70s called Justification for Higher Education. And this poster's got, fancy house car. This is a poster like the poster shows a helicopter. It shows his house, right? And it got all these, fancy cars and expensive cars, right? We had visions as to what we wanted to attain. The challenge is that kids can make $100 grand a year on Instagram just being cool, and they really don't have no vision as to what they want to accomplish, right? They have no, and because they have no vision, they have no desire, right?
Right.
And so what happens is because they don't have no vision, desire, then when they want to try to do something, they say, well, I like to do this, I like to do that. And as soon as it gets difficult and hard, they quit and give up. And the reason why they give up, because they haven't been taught what true desire means, what true vision means, and what true passion means. Because when you have a true passion and true calling, you're going to have to go through some tests, challenges, and trials in order to make that work. They don't know what they want. So a kid may say, for example, your kids may say, hey, I want to get a scholarship and play ball, but what do you want to do with that? Okay, I want to go to the NBA. And so, they know the statistics, they know what they told, but they don't realize that's not the goal, was never to get to the league.
Right.
That was a goal, that was an objective. My objective is get to the, but my goal was to be the best player on the team, be the best player on the league. So it came down to, can I be the best of the best? That's when I fought in UFC 1, right? It wasn't one thing I tell people about UFC 1. And somebody was asking, and I didn't know this until somebody told me this and sat me down and explained it to me, because I brushed UFC 1 off a lot because it was cool. It was like, and somebody sat me down and said, do you know how historic that was? And I was thinking, and they started explaining to me all of how I need to see that. And I was looking at it, and I was looking at, well, yeah, it was cool, this and that. He goes, no, you don't understand that. And it wasn't until I called up Art Davie to clarify that, to get to me. Art Davie was one of the promoter and matchmaker, one of the matchmakers, and one of the owners of UFC at early UFCs, right? And it was that I said, I went to Art Davie, and what it was talking about was, were we really the best of the best? He says, you guys were the best of the best for this reason. Not because there's a whole lot of karate champions, there's a whole lot of guys. So you know why you guys were the best of the best? Because you guys agreed to step in the ring. See, here's what people don't realize. You can, after UFC 1, and this is somebody tell me this, and I didn't realize this, and I had to really think about this. We put our systems and what we believe as fighters and martial arts to the test. There was no sparring. We didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who Hoist Gracie was. I mean, I kind of knew who the Gracie was when I go back to it. I looked at the Gracie in action tape a year earlier, but we didn't know who each other were, and we didn't know how a fight was going to be with other qualified champions and from other disciplines. We didn't know what it was going to be like fighting in with no rules to no time limit. We had no idea, right? So, but what it was about was being able to put what you believe to the test. That was what that is. You talk about the 300, the 300, the whole essence about the 300. Because Leonidas could have avoided that.
Yeah.
He could have avoided that, but that's not what he wanted. And he was a little selfish in a little bit, because if you read the book, The Gates of Fire, you kind of get a peek to the inside of the Spartans. And so what Leonidas didn't want, he kind of had this idea, how dare the Persians come throw a challenge down on me, and I'm not going to answer it. And the government's not going to let me answer because there was politics at that time, right? Okay, so Leonidas, I'm going to answer the challenge because I'm not going to let the 300 let the Persians come to us. We're going to go to them. So it's about putting the 300, the best 300 of, remember the Spartan army had a legion size there. They had over 10,500 people in that whole army. He took 300 of his best of the best of the Spartan army to go meet Xerxes, right?
Yep.
So when I started looking at that, I said, you know what? When I look at celebrities, when I look at athletes, when I look at accountants, lawyers, doctors, you know what I'm looking at? People who are professionals, the best of what they do, right? So when I talk to kids, I say, hey, what do you want? Oh, I want this. I want to make money. I want to be this. I want to be that. And so all of a sudden I say, well, I says, what else? Oh, I want to make money. I want this. Okay. And I says, how about, you ever think about being the best at what you do? What is that? They have no idea. That is something they have never been taught, right? So what I do when I tell my title boxing club franchise, right, and I have people come in and we give them, we teach it in a way that there's a little secret sauce, I call it, that the way we teach it. When I have my members come in, prospective members come in, they're looking for something. They're looking for an experience, right? We don't sell a product. We don't sell boxing, kickboxing. You can get that anywhere. We sell an experience, right? Title sells an experience. And it's left up to the franchisee owner and to develop the culture, whatnot. So I created a culture that was designed for people to come in and says, Zane, I missed high school football. I didn't play college football. Or somebody says, every Sunday I watch the NBA, the hockey, the baseball championships, and I want to know, what does it take to be that guy? What does it do? When you're watching Tom Brady do the 2-minute drill against the Atlanta Falcons, right? Atlanta ain't never been the same after that Super Bowl. They ain't never been the same. That whole city ain't never been the same because you knew what was coming. And so they say to you, what does it take to be that guy, Tom Brady? What does it take to be Jordan? What does it take to be Kobe? What does it take to be all these other guys, all these guys that you see, musicians, dancers, whatever it might be. How do you become the best of the best at what you do? That's the true goal, right? So if you teach people how to become the best of what they do, and they get a chance to express themselves, here's what I found out. The passion now starts to reveal itself.
Yes.
So the passion and the desire starts to reveal themselves. And now they can actually convert my members can now convert what they've learned in class and channel that into something that they want to do to become the best they want to become. And that's the key. That's what I figured out, is that these kids today, they have not, their goal is they're on the right track, but they just need to add a little bit more depth to their goal and says, hey, my goal is to become the best pharmacist. I want to be I have a kid now that's training in fighting. And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, I want to be a pharmacist. I said, just a pharmacist? He goes, yeah. I said, why not be the best pharmacist that you could be? He goes, well, what does that mean? I said, now you have to go find that out. Go find out who the best pharmacist is.
So
yeah.
Off, but this is dope. This is dope, right? So I have a slogan, and I put it on shirts, and I came up with it maybe 2009, 2010. So I got my signature on the front, and they got my slogan on the back with my signature again. Is how can they beat you if they can't outwork you, right?
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, this is not just for athletes. Here's the deal: when you have that. When you adapt that mantra, when you adapt that way of thinking, that mentality, along the way, you're busting your ass. It takes thousands and thousands and thousands of hours to become great at something, right?
Yeah.
So along the way on your journey, you may have wanted to play in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
You've done everything that you humanly possibly could do. But at the end of the day, the Most High is orchestrating all of this.
Yeah.
He is either going to allow you to fulfill that desire that you have, or along the way, you're gonna figure out your passion and your purpose on that journey, because no journey is just ascends.
Right.
It has flat tires, U-turns, stoplights, red lights. You're gonna break down. Your alternator might go out.
Sure.
That's just how it is, because it's adversity in life, and you got to go through something to get something. I tell you.
Right.
A woman gets pregnant, right? It takes 38 to 40 weeks to produce a child, a life. So throughout those 9 to 10 months, she's gaining weight. Her nose is getting bigger. She's having cravings. She doesn't feel attractive. Her body is going through a massive change, but she produces at the end of that, because even through labor, there's pain. So you got to go through something to get something.
Sure.
The problem with these young people today, they don't want to go through the process.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you where I had that same mentality. I want to be the best, right? So my success came from the work ethic. That's what I'm known for. Just unmatched work ethic, right? So I figured out early on that if I fell in love with the process, the end result is going to be better. So process, if I fell in love with the process, I'm going to be able to have more stats on game day.
Right.
So that's the trick. And it's really not even a trick or a secret. It's just old school, put your work boots on and pull and get your tool belt.
But here's what I would I'll cut you off, Donnie. Here's what I would also add. And here's something else is quality coaching at a young age. And here's what I'll tell you. Because quality coaching, because you have talent, because like I said, if you put, I'm always curious. We had, guys at the barbershop, we always chopping it up. And I made a comment one time and said, I wonder if Michael Jordan would have been Michael Jordan if he went to Louisville. If he'd have went to Notre Dame, if he had went to Georgetown, right? Put him on the other side, he went to Georgetown. Would that system at Georgetown facilitated his skills? We don't know that. But what we knew, though, we do know that what Dean Smith produced out of UCLA before Michael Jordan, we knew that Dean Smith had a system that teaches you how to develop. Because if you look at that team, very few people scored 20 points in North Carolina. Very few people scored 20 points a game on that college team. It was a different dynamic. If you look at the points per game, you may have had a few games, but most everybody scored, in your double figures like that, but mid to low double figures, right? And you wonder about the process, right? So I always talk to kids about this, about the process. And so when I was in college, after I got beat up, Don Munson, we sit down, you have your conference in the year, and what are you going to work on, Frazier, this and that? I said, well, coach, and when James Worthy and all them guys and Matt Doherty and them cats were all working out in Texas, we played at, I think it was Texas El Paso in Sweet 16. We got a chance to watch them practice. So I was writing stuff down on the napkin. Oh, they doing this. So I'm saying, because remember, they played Indiana for the championship that year and they lost. So people forget Indiana beat that James Worthy team, and they wound up going back to the NCAA finals the next year, right? And they wound up with it. That's where they had Jordan. So that's two teams back to back. So you ask yourself, North Carolina has got to be the team. They got to be at that time the Alabama of basketball at that point, right? So you figure, what is the best of the best do? So you start looking at, so I go to my coach, right, Don Munson, and I said, man, this guy, Coach Magic Johnson, man, he gonna teach, I got drills, because I was already playing with guys like my favorite player in the whole wide world, my favorite player that I played basketball with growing up. I had two players on my favorite player, and I thought I wanted to be a combination. That was Marcus Johnson from UCLA and Reggie Theus, who played at UNLV. Marcus Johnson played with the Milwaukee Bucks, and Reggie Theus played with Chicago Bulls. And so we used to all play together, and they had the little big high school game. They had a league where they have high school, college, junior college, and pros play in the same league. I don't think they have that. When I guess it's illegal now.
The pro-am thing.
Yeah, the pro-am thing. They used to have that where all the kids, so you got a chance to play against the guys who you was watching on TV. So you got a chance to sometimes go, hey man, where you working out today? Where you working out this? I used to train, one of the guys I used to train was Kiki Vandeweghe. That's a tough dude. Kiki Vandeweghe, I think he now works for Adam Silver now. But I used to train with all the UCLA guys. So anyway, I go to Don Munson. I got my list of what I'm going to do for the summer. And I got this, and Don Munson looked at me, and Don, I think he played in college, but I'm not sure how much he didn't, he didn't have the athletic skill, stuff like that, right? And so I said, Coach, can you teach me this? Coach, can you teach me that? And he looked at me, he said, son, I can't teach you what I don't know. And wait, and I'm saying, wait a minute. You Don Munson, man. You Coach Magic Johnson. You did this. You got Magic. Magic had that before. But Magic had that before. So I went to go see Magic when I used to see him at Rogers Park all the time. We used to go ball. I said, Magic, what you doing, this and that? And I would get some ideas and drills from him. But here's the point I want to make. I walked out there saying, I'm going to be a development coach. And if a fighter ever comes to me and says to me, Zane, can you teach me this? Can you help me do that? I'm not going to be able to say, I can't teach you what I don't know.
Right.
So I'm going to go learn all of the stuff that I can learn, everything I could possibly learn. So that way I can give younger athletes quality coaching who have the desire, who have the ability, who understand their passion, who have all these things. Can I give it to them early? Because if you get quality coaching and a kid who has desire and ability early, that becomes the secret ingredient. And that's what you look at all the people, they start early. Like, I don't know, you guys heard the story about Michael Jackson, right? How everybody looks at how Michael became great. You guys know the story, right, behind Michael, right? So the story I hear when I hang around the Motown guys is that Michael wasn't supposed to be in the group, right? And so he was watching his brothers rehearse, stuff like that, right? But one of the things Joe used to do is that, because one of my cousins had dated one of them, or one of my aunties that dated them, because they went to Fairfax High School too early on in their career. So that's how they lived in the same neighborhood. That's kind of how my mom and dad, and they were kind of in that neighborhood. There was a group called the Silvers. So everybody kind of knew everybody. And my dad used to talk about Joe Jackson. You know, Joe got them boys out there working on perfection. How they work on perfection? My dad used to tell me. I said, Pop, how they work on perfection? And he said, listen, he used to tell the story all the time. And so he said, Joe used to have when they would make a mistake, the boys, before, this is not including Michael, he would have them take these bricks and they would walk on these big bricks, and they would walk across the yard. I don't care if it's snowing or it's hot, whatever it is, they have to carry these bricks across to the other side of the lawn, and they had to line them up perfectly, and they had to go get another. Each one of them had their own bricks, right? Michael wasn't allowed to do that because he wasn't in the group. I think it was Marlon and one of the brothers got hurt. My pop was telling me, right? And he was saying that Michael was in the backyard as a young boy playing with, being perfect with them bricks on his own, because his desire, right? What we're talking about is desire, talent, and coaching at an early age. Just the whole thing. Michael had that desire early on. So he out there on his own volition to go out there and say, I'm going to be perfect. Think about that. That's a 5-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. He putting bricks out there. He see what, I'm going to make my bricks perfect. He has learned what it means to be perfect and the work that goes along with it. Yeah. And then here was this. When this moment came, when I think it was, I forget, I'm not sure if it's Marlon or one of the brothers got hurt. And I can't remember what happened to him. And dad said, y'all can't go on the show, this and that. Y'all, we going there. And then they said, Michael knows it. Michael knows all the routines. He knows all the songs. And my dad said, Joe said, you got one time, get it right. Michael had confidence to be perfect. Mm-hmm. Think about that. He had the confidence to be perfect. Not the confidence he can do it, but the confidence, why? Because he put in the perfect work. That's what we hear all the time. If it doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody looks at Mayweather, right? That guy's been practicing perfect ever since man, come on. You know, that cat's been practicing perfect ever since he could remember. It's a third generation fighter. Everybody want to know, how come they can't beat Mayweather? Quality coaching. Mm-hmm. He had desire, heart, ability, and intelligence, because he was taught that. But he had great quality coaching at a very young age. He had his daddy. You ever see the fight between Floyd Sr. and Sugar Ray Leonard? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Watch that fight, man. You look at that fight, you go, my goodness. Floyd Sr. was good, man. They throw some punches in back in those rounds. And he passes that to his little son. Shoot, man, ain't nobody gonna beat that kid. There's a reason why he's 50-0.
Confident.
Yeah. Yeah, he's confident. Yeah. And so that's why I'm a fan of Floyd Mayweather, because not his work ethic, his desire, all those stuff, I'm a fan of his. But what I think is his greatest attribute, which people don't talk about, is the fact that he practices perfect. He practices perfect. So what happens is, how do you can teach that to kids, because all it is regimen. So here's my point. If you catch a kid early, between the ages of, I say 8 and 9, because when you get to 12, it's too late. 12 or 13 might be too late. If you're talking about going to the 1%, get to the league, right? You can probably teach them something, but at that time, 12:30, they may not have the ability to be able to dial in and focus like that because, and at the younger age, if you make it a game, like when I train my kids in martial arts to become black belts, stuff like that, good fighters, you train them early. You train them early and train them, get them quality coaches, and you feed that desire, man. You feed that passion, you feed that, and you teach them what, hey, you're good at this, you're good at that, stuff like that. And so that's kind of like I do, like my doctors does. When I have my kids program, I would let them watch them play sports, and you see what the kid gravitates towards.
Yep.
And when you see what he gravitates toward, what he likes, that's how you feed that.
Yep. You got to nurture it.
Yeah, you nurture that. When you nurture that, then you got a chance. And so, but here's the problem. You and I can nurture it, right, at this level. But in two, can you nurture from the root to the fruit?
Yeah. That's
the key. Can you nurture to the root to the fruit? And if you can nurture from the root to the fruit, then that's where you can. That's why you look at, I'm a fan of Alabama, right? I'm a 70s kid. And I remember George Wallace saying, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation. I remember that, man. And my mama told me, boy, don't you ever go down to Alabama. But I'm an Alabama fan of football because I like their consistently getting to the championship every year. They may not win it every year. What does it take to be that guy? Right? What does it take to be those guys? What does it take to even get a letter from Alabama, right? You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things that, again, quality coaching at a very young age. So, that's kind of where I think if we can, so you say, what's the point, Zane? What are you trying to make? If we get to the kids young enough, or I like to work with the millennial group right now because the millennial group are searching. See, when you got a kid who's hungry, I like to work with the millennials. I like to work with all the kids, but the millennial group is, I feel, my personal responsibility because my generation is the one that gave them participation trophies. We told them they were special. We told them they could have anything they want. We didn't make them work on process. That's our generation. So my give back to that, it says, okay, I want to go work with the young kid, these millennials, because once I get them into my boxing class and they're having fun and they enjoy it. Because one of the things that I talked about 30 years ago that I learned from my martial instructor, your workouts got to be fun. You got to be able to learn something, right? Okay. And you got to be able to value. So that's kind of thing. And so what I do is I kind of make it fun, give them a workout, and then they learn something in that order, right? So that's what we've always done in the 80s, and I think a lot of trainers do that today. When you make it fun, that's when you got a chance with the kids. When you make it fun, and then they get something, they get the benefit of getting moving their body, changing their mood, how you make them feel good about themselves. And then you teach them a little bit, little doses, a little bit of time so they can take in little doses. Then you got a chance with them, right? But for the most part, that's kind of where, I find that we got to get it. I find my success has been getting them early, quality coaching early to feed that.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside the Minds podcast with Dante Marsh and Ryan Hyde. Check out our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter accounts to see our upcoming show announcements, links to our previous shows, and sound bites. And don't forget to hit that follow button while you're there.
Hey, this is Logan Bandy.
Hi, this is Zane Frazier.
This is Art Jimerson.
Chris Rainey.
This is Boots Electric, and thank you for joining me on my special guest spot on Inside the Minds podcast, where everybody wants to be if they're smart.
Good field position start, play action. Burr's going to load it up, but he's short on the throw. Intercepted. Dante Marsh has his 30th career interception and a good return back into Ottawa territory. Well, the usually strong-armed Henry Burris comes up short.